I wrote the month. I started writing. It was 12, and then I put on the date was the 21st.
And
then I
you
put
know
the year
that
of
today's the
24.
7th. It's 2025.
1/07.
That part I do know. Okay, welcome everybody to the Traverse City Planning Commission. This is our regular meeting, January 7th, 2025. I hope everyone in this room had a wonderful holiday season, and it's nice to be back with everyone. So we will start with the roll call.
Commissioner Deturi,
Here.
Commissioner Hershey,
Here.
Commissioner Treadwell's not here, Commissioner Knapp,
Here.
Commissioner O'Brien,
Present.
Commissioner Heller is sick tonight, Commissioner McGillivrary's not here, Commissioner Anderson,
Here.
and Commissioner Swenson.
Here.
Thank you. As always, we'll start with our land acknowledgement. The land on which we gather is the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting this land and inspiring us to uphold our responsibilities to do the same. Are there any announcements?
Only announcement that we have today is when we met last month, we discussed any ideas or thoughts or maybe model ordinances related to short-term rentals that you wanted to send to us. Please do so this week so that we can start putting that together. And it's not an obligation that you have to, but if there was something that you came across that was worth including for the rest of the group, we'd be happy to share that because we would like to bring that topic back for discussion at the study session, anything that carries over from today, as well as the annual report. So that'll be our next meeting.
Okay, great. Hi, Mitch.
Hi.
So that takes us to our election of officers. I have assumed that everybody read the procedure that was in your packet. I'm going to do my best to follow that. So I'm declaring the nominations are open for offices. The offices that we are voting on tonight are chairperson, vice chairperson, and secretary. So I am opening the nominations for chair.
I
Bye-bye.
move for, nope, I would like to nominate Debbie Hershey to be chair.
Support.
It doesn't have to be a second, and under the regulations, I can either accept or reject, so I accept the nomination. Are there any other names that would like to be placed in nomination for chair at this time?
I don't want to make a nomination, but I did have a question. I know that there are a couple of members of the commission who are recommended for reappointment, but that process hasn't been completed through the city commission yet. And I just wondered if there were something fluky happened and we were to elect someone who was not eventually, or for the full year, a member of the commission, is there a plan B? Do we get a do-over?
Yeah, so we've dealt with this before
Great.
with resignations of officers. They just, for
sure.
various reasons, job change, things like that. And so at the next meeting, we just have an election for that position. Yep, so
Thank
that's
you.
how we would handle it.
So if I was not, because I am one of those people, if I were not to be reappointed, but I'm elected a position tonight, then the meeting following the appointments of the planning commissioners would then be a re-election
For that office.
for that
Yep,
position. Okay,
yep.
great.
It's kind of like what we did when David resigned and moved to Minnesota, and
Yeah.
we just held
That
another
tracks.
one. Yep.
Technically, members serve until their replacement has been appointed, their replacement has been sworn in, and the replacement has shown up to their first meeting. So if either of you end up getting replaced, and you show up to the next meeting, but whoever replaces you does not, then you will continue to be able to vote.
Right.
Seeing as there's no other nominations, I'll move that we close nominations and cast unanimous ballot for Debbie Hershey.
The closing of the nominations does take a second, though.
Yeah, there needs to be a
Second.
second.
Yep. All right, so we have Anna
Wait,
as
wait.
a second.
I nominated. Can I also second?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
he moved
Okay.
to
It's a
close.
separate motion.
Great,
Yep.
second.
So Brian moved to close the nominations.
Anna seconded it. And now it's all in favor of Debbie Hershey remaining the chair, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Now we're going to do, thank you very much. And now we're going to move on to the office of vice chairperson. So nominations are open for the office of vice chair. Does anybody wish to nominate? Mr. O'Brien.
I would nominate Anna Deturi for vice chair.
Anna, do you accept this nomination?
I accept.
Thank you. Are there any other names to be put into play here for vice chair? Okay, hearing none, then I need a motion to close the nominations.
I move that we close the nominations and cast unanimous ballot for Anna Deturi.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Oh, no, wait, then I have to have a motion to close the nomination.
No,
You-
that was
No,
a
he
motion
did
to
do that.
close
Don't you
and
vote
to
on it?
elect her. Yeah, we do it all in one.
Oh, you do both,
Saves the
okay,
step.
thank you. So confusing. All in favor of Anna Deturi being the vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, Anna Deturi. Now we have the office of secretary. Do we have a motion for someone as secretary?
I'd like to nominate Shay O'Brien for secretary.
Thank you. Shay, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Are there any other names to be put forth for secretary? Hearing none, do I have a motion to close the nomination?
I'll move that we close nominations and cast unanimous ballot for Shay O'Brien
You need a
for
second.
secretary.
Second.
Mitch seconded.
I was going to try to just make it easy, but Mitch seconded first.
So, all in favor of Shay O'Brien, secretary, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, everyone. That is the election of our officers. And give me a minute, my computer just blacked itself out here. Okay, now we're going to move on to the annual bylaw review, Mr. Winter.
Yeah, so at this first meeting in January, we'd like to hold a space for you all to consider your bylaws. There is no mandate that any changes be made, but we want to provide you that opportunity because these bylaws kind of dictate how your meetings operate and things of that nature. Couple examples of changes we've done in the past. I think 2 years ago, we added the process for electing officers directly into the bylaws, so therefore it was memorialized and we didn't have to keep getting it from the clerk's office. Last year, the Planning Commission decided to move their meeting times to 6 o'clock, and then we restructured some of the content because over the years, you know, you had different sections of the bylaws talking about the same process, and so we kind of consolidated them so it read a little more clearly. So a couple things that we have been approached at with staff, just to put out there for consideration again, is we are currently a 9-member commission. There have been some inquiring about possibly making it a little smaller. This is a conversation that the DDA board is having as well. You know, it oftentimes becomes a conversation of quality versus quantity, and some people think the more people you have, the better representation, but some people feel when they've been on those very large boards that they can become unwieldy, and sometimes more isn't always better. So that's a consideration that has been brought to us as staff that we're just conveying back to you. The next one is the representation on the Planning Commission. So the Planning Enabling Act outlines the representation of a planning commission. And there's a category called an ex officio member. And there are 3 types of ex officio members. The city manager or their designee, so in this case that is filled by Jerry. An elected official, so this is filled by Mitch and Jackie, or someone who does not live in the jurisdiction but is a voter in another jurisdiction. Some may ask, why does that come into play? For instance, when I worked in Acme, the tribe has a lot of land holdings there, and they're a separate unit of government. So we had a tribal member who didn't live on the township serve on the Planning Commission, and it provided better coordination between the 2 entities. So that's just an example of how that might come into play. Now, the Planning Enabling Act does say that no more than 1/3 of your Planning Commission can be ex officio. It doesn't mean that you have to have one of each, because we don't. We have 2 of one type, 1 of another. We have 3 on the 9-member board. So the reason I kind of bring this up, because it ties into the previous consideration I mentioned. If you went down to a 7-member board, you would have to lose 1 of the ex officio seats because you would be exceeding 1/3 of your membership at that point. So just throwing that out for consideration. I will say that the membership composition of the Planning Commission is prescribed by local ordinance. So any change desired by the planning commission to the membership or the number would have to go to the city commission for their approval. They would have to be the ones that make that decision. So that is all I have on that. I'll turn it back over to you.
And
to
not
have
just
a
an
discussion.
approval, a possible ordinance change, right?
That's, yeah, the approval would, the ordinance change would be the necessary approval.
Correct. Okay, well, this is our time to discuss the bylaws, and I don't know, let's start with those two topics since they are brought up, but if anybody else has seen anything else in the bylaws that they would like to question, please bring that up. So let's start with size of the board. So we are currently at 9. And just from my point of view, that has allowed us to, I think, all times have a quorum. So the lower you get, sometimes there's a possibility you may not have a quorum. But what do people think about 7 versus 9? I think 5 is way too small. Mitch had his hand up first.
Yeah. 9 seems to have worked out well, in my experience, both on this side and from the outside, especially considering quorum issues. My question then is, aside from number of ex officios being no more than a third, are there other criteria in our own bylaws and city ordinance and other ways that, for example, for certain votes require a set number of people rather than a set percentage of the board?
No, I think you are referencing what the city commission deals with, that they have a
Yeah.
number of votes. That's memorialized in charter, so no, there is no
Well, it's
provision.
not just city commission, but other boards have
Correct.
similar.
And there's nothing in our bylaws that I'm aware of that talks about the vote having to meet a certain threshold. If they do, it's 2/3 of the membership or 1/3 of the membership. It's not a set number like 5, like you deal
Yes.
with at the city commission. So it's proportional to the size of the body.
Got it.
Commissioner Anderson?
Thank you. In researching this, I went to other planning commissions in our area and found that Leelanau County, this is based on their website information, Leelanau County has 11 commissioners on their planning commission, Grand Traverse County at 9. Only the townships, Peninsula, East Bay, and Garfield had 7. So it seems as though the larger populations or larger organizations tended to be correlated with more planning commissioners. And I think that is likely supportive of the intent of the enabling legislation, which goes to some pains to be sure that commissioners are chosen to represent as broad an array of segments of the community as possible, both demographically, economically, et cetera. And when I look around here, I think we could probably be even better represented in some segments of our community. And so I would not support a contraction of the number just for that reason alone. But I think it goes beyond that into some philosophical issues, which include things like diversity of thought. You know, more voices tend to bring more perspectives, more challenges, and perhaps raise more issues than a smaller group. That's of value. And then, you know, there's a documented danger of groupthink, of getting into your own little echo chamber and reinforcing each other. And the research has shown that definitely results in systematic errors that are made in collective decision-making from smaller groups that engage in that practice. So I think the risks are quite significant. You know, the DDA was mentioned. Of course, they have a commission of 12, I believe, so they're kind of a unique animal. And
12.
so those are my comments on the topic.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. O'Brien?
Has the planning commission always been 9 members? Does anybody know the history on that?
I don't know offhand. I don't know that it has changed much.
Okay.
boy, I'm thinking of the 10 years since I moved back. I think it's been 9. Yeah.
Okay.
I will say, yeah, you mentioned, like Acme, when I was there, at one point was 9. They went to 7, but they were originally 7, went up to 9. For those of you that lived around here, there was a little Meyer fiasco that went on for about a decade out there. And since small townships don't have staff, like the planning commission had to do the work.
Right.
And so they needed more people to help. But then once that got resolved, they dropped back down to 9 a few years later. Yeah. And then just a point of clarification, we don't have a county planning commission anymore.
Oh,
They
thank
abolished
you.
it about
It's
6
still
years
on
ago.
their website.
I'm sure, yeah. Yeah, in fact, the department just sits empty upstairs for the most part. It's got beautiful views of the bay, though.
Ari?
The one thing I was gonna say was, this is a little weird and kind of backwards, but if we could add, I am not in favor of decreasing. I also don't really like 11. That's a lot of people. But I could see the value in having a county commissioner, a county representative that is ex officio on this board. Only because I think it's really important to have planning commissions, and if that could even have a hair or a glimmer of hope to get the county to reinstate a county commission, it might be worth like the Hail Mary. That is my only thought in like, there is value there. If we are trying to solve certain crises regionally, like housing, it would be really beneficial to have a more collaborative space for that.
Okay, so it seems like before we move on, and I see like a nod of heads, that it sounds like 9 is the number that everybody's happy with. So you're starting to veer into the other part of the conversation, is we have 2 city commission representatives on this board. And we can have 1, we can have 2, I mean, according to the rules, but also we can have a non-elector or someone who lives outside the state. So, Commissioner O'Brien, you wanted to speak next, I believe.
I was wondering, are we the only commission, the only board that has 2 members on? I mean, 2 members of the city commission?
On the planning commission?
No, are we
the only in the
Planning
city?
commission.
Are we the only
City board.
board that has
Light and
2
Power.
members?
No, Light and Power is another
Light and Power
board.
does, okay.
Yeah.
But the DDA has 11 members, and how many do they have?
The mayor.
The mayor.
So 1.
DDA has had 2 when a member of the public is also appointed.
Right, different case, though. Different, they were appointed by the city commission, not as a city commissioner, as a city resident.
Yeah.
So different circumstances. I think I'm in favor, like what Anna's saying about inviting somebody else from outside of the city, because what we do impacts the county. So I would be in favor of reducing the number of city commissioners that represent.
What do other people think?
I would agree with Hannah and Shay. I think to bring in somebody from outside the community maybe is a requirement of the board. Maybe that's too much. Coordinated planning efforts is not just in sewer. It's not just the city. You know, it's regional. And I think if we could get an outside voice, I think that would really be beneficial.
I'd have to think about it.
Okay.
I don't have an opinion one way or the other. I'll tell you, my gut lean is you got the city commission to agree, and then you got to get the county to appoint someone. You got to get the county board to agree, and the county board will have to pay that person to show up. County commissioners may not want to take it on. They may not see a value in it, and we're likely just to get one of the commissioners who already represents the city.
It wouldn't have to be a county commissioner, though. It could be somebody, it's
Yeah.
saying
A
non-elector.
non-elector.
Just
So
county-
it's somebody,
So
yeah, somebody who
somebody
lives
from
in the county.
outside.
Sorry,
Resident.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Could be
I should have
anybody.
been more clear.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a good idea. I'll be honest with you. You know, what we do and what we decide is really more for the city. It's a city commission, and maybe I might change my mind on this. I'm not hard and fast on it, but I'll play devil's advocate on this. So one of the complaints you often hear is we already he provides so many services to people who don't live in the city, and but use city facilities, come in here every day, 40,000 people from outside the county. So, and I think you'll hear a lot of people who are, I'll give you an example. This didn't involve the planning commission, but when the city put a stop sign on West Front Street, okay? The townships, everybody wanted it outside, wanted it removed, but the people in the city wanted it to stay because it was better for them. And so, the county, there was a consideration of whether or not a stoplight should go there. But then should the city pay for a stoplight to accommodate extra traffic on one of its streets? Or should they, people, and it's resolved itself for the most part, most times. People have found other routes to get where they need to get. So the question becomes is, are you really looking out for the best interest of the people of this community, who are paying the taxes for the planning department, or the people who live outside the county who don't even want a county planning commission to coordinate? And if you just get someone who's off the street, what impact are they going to have? They're not even going to liaise to the county board. They're going to come from a township. They're going to be more likely to feel themselves as a member of a surrounding township than they are as a member of the county in general. So then which township do you choose this person from? And so do you choose them from Garfield Township or Peninsula Township? So it's not going to get I don't see it unless it's a person who the county board appoints to it and who reports to the county board, either a county commissioner or a county official. You're not going to get much, there's not going to be any liaison or opportunity from the to the county board between this planning commission. It's not going to have a huge impact on what the county does. That's kind of my feeling about it. I'm not saying I'm right now. I don't know if it sounds good in theory. I just don't know in practice if it would work out. It could. It all depends on who gets appointed.
On that too.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I'll just add, Brian makes some very valid points there with the considerations, so definitely not disregarded. I think when I heard Shay talking about it, I think you were looking through it, and correct me if I'm wrong, through the lens of bringing in a broader viewpoint. Because we're not an
Diversifying,
island, I think I heard you say that.
Yeah.
If the planning commission is interested in exploring this, given what you just mentioned, like who do you select? If they want someone from the county, a possible suggestion would be their new hire. His name is Max. So they did abolish the planning department and the planning commission 6 years ago, but they created a new position and hired this guy. He's the community development coordinator, working with the city and all the townships and coordinating. He's a planner, not called a planner, if you will.
Yeah.
So it's like the first step in returning the planning department to the county, and because county planning commissions don't regulate land use, but they help coordinate that broader vision. And we feel the absence of it, right? Like everyone's acting in little fiefdoms right now, and like, no, this is Garfield, this is Traverse, but really this is all our region. We all work together and play together. So just throwing that out there. And I will add, because of this thing that you said too, no decision on any of these topics have to be made today. You can have a discussion and bring it back, okay? Because I know, there might need to be some thinking. You might have questions for us that we have to bring things back, get information and bring it to you. So don't feel like you have to make any changes today. And even though we provide this space at the beginning of the year, at any point, the commissioner can say, hey, let's bring the bylaws back up. I have an idea.
And I just want to reiterate, just so everybody heard this, yes, the law says you can have a non-elector, but you also could just have a citizen, an extra seat for a citizen.
Right.
It doesn't have to be the non-elector. So I'm just throwing that out there. I'm just going to go down the row, Anna.
I
see why they're in the first.
was also thinking of it more as like a visionary. It would be really helpful to have a diversified opinion. And like what Sean was saying, it feels so much in silo right now. Like I would really love for large developments not to be popping up in the same exact areas. Like it feels right now like there is a very concentrated effort to have sections of the area be the area that gets the next new build. And it just would maybe make me feel like it's more cohesive if we had somebody outside of the city providing their lived experience. I also could be living in a dystopian reality. Like, why would I think that somebody would have this great opinion? It's just possible. I think maybe possible. And then the other thing I was thinking is we so often hear about just the prices of the city of Traverse City, and so many people get priced out, or so many people can't find somewhere to live within the city limits. So it would just be a way to, again, go back to that diversifying that Jackie mentioned and Shay, to be able to get as many different opinions as we can. But also, I totally get that it might be really unrealistic.
Mitch?
Yes.
I'm going down mine.
I definitely see a purpose for more outside feedback to this board, either through somebody in an additional seat or through some other official capacity. But I also see a rather big can of worms as far as who that person is. Ideally, we'd have a county planning department again that would coordinate between all the townships and units of government in the county, and hopefully beyond that. So we don't have issues that can arise at municipal boundaries for lack of communication across them. But if we are getting somebody from, if we're getting somebody from a planning background, I can say we have 2 planners from adjacent townships that already live in Traverse City. So they could be appointed as current members of this body. Also, if we just have one person and they are from a township or representing what's happening in a township, that is just one part of the broader picture. Even if we're looking at a landscape of, okay, how do the people that commute into and work in Traverse City but don't reside in here currently or want to move here, what perspective are we bringing? Is it somebody coming down M22, somebody coming north M37, somebody coming either direction on 31 or 72? There's a lot of people that live in the surrounding area that bring a wide diversity of opinions, viewpoints, lifestyles, etc. And it seems very reductionist to have that be just one person behind this desk. But in lieu of some regional entity, and the TTCI, now functioning as MPO, serves some of this role in being able to coordinate for transportation projects, which is part of planning. I would like it if we could do more. At present, it's up to us and staff to have conversations across our respective municipal boundaries. Fortunately, we do have some of that background here, whether it's Sean talking to his old co-workers in Acme or Leslie in Long Lake. And myself, I spent the morning at the organizational meeting of the Leelanau County Commission to try to get to know those people and see how things in that county, since it does overlap with Port of Traverse City, is shaking out. And
Okay, let's hear what Jackie has to say. She's been so
Yes,
patient.
Thank you. I think if you read the enabling legislation, you're going to see that they caution against appointment of planning commissioners who have expertise in planning. They specifically request that there not be planners, architects, developers who sit as planning commission members. They are looking for people to represent community perspectives as opposed to subject matter expertise. So I think that's one thing that we should keep in mind. And then another point for consideration would be the trade-off of an elected representative for an unelected representative, and whether that further distances the commission from its community. Couple of points.
Mr. Bryan?
I don't think it would distance, I think, so you guys see everything twice. Like, you get see it at the planning commission, and then you get to vote on it again at the city commission. So either way, the city commission is seeing whatever we do.
And I point out that that's not always true, most notably in the recent decision where the
How so?
City commission voted away its right to approve or disapprove.
Right.
Or request for modifications for the.
But that was a choice that that body made.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that required a
Right.
simple majority vote, same
Yeah.
as approving the master plan would have.
And you
They-
saw all the presentations on it, though. I mean, do you have anything else to add?
no.
Okay. Jerry, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, what's I don't know if there's an advantage or disadvantage, but like in the past, usually when the planning commission brings something to the city commission, we've seen where like maybe the recommendation doesn't take hold at the commission level. I'm just wondering if you removed one city commission from that, what does that do to the process? Like, if now you only have one city commissioner on the planning commission and they bring something to the city commission, I'm just trying to think, because a lot of times when there's recommendation, it seems like, at least from what I've seen, like both of the city commissioners on the planning commission are bringing that forward. I know the master plan maybe wasn't like that. Just wondering what's the difference dynamic with just having one commissioner, city commissioner on the planning, bring it to the full board, if, like, how much of an impact is that, right? If there's two or one, I don't know.
The one thing I'd say with seeing quite a few different city commissioners in that role, I think it just gives more more detail, I guess, to the topic when it comes up before the city commission. For example, like, if, I can't think of a perfect example, but there are many times where we are addressing just a text amendment, but two city commissioners happen to be in attendance at that meeting. They both heard the debates, the conversation, voted one way or the other. Then they can bring that experience to the agenda item when it makes it to the city commission. That's at least how I've kind of witnessed it unfold. But I don't know what that would do if there were one city commissioner versus two. Like, we almost always have city commissioners present. Like, those attendances are very rare that people miss. They're very committed. So the city commissioners are almost always here, so then there's almost always two people taking that information back. So you would run the risk, if you only had one, of maybe somebody that is not these two city commissioners, like missing a meeting and not bringing that back. It would be infrequent, I think, where that would actually come up. Like, it would have to be on a voting night, not a study session. Like, all of these variables. But that's just my experience from having seen a couple different city commissioners in those roles.
And I'll just add just some perspective, not advocating for one point or the other here. Planning commissions are supposed to be more apolitical. That's why they put a limit to the number of possible political, because they make objective land use recommendations to the political body. So that's where the politics can come involved in there too. And that's why the act requires that the planning commission adopt a master plan and not the elected body. I will say that with that, in all the communities that I've worked in my years, and I don't know about you, I've never seen more than one elected official on a planning commission. And part of that is because as elected officials, they have so many other roles to play. They serve on Light and Power, Economic Development Board, all these other, so they're spread pretty thin.
Ad hocs.
Ad hocs, and then a lot of times the ones that serve on the heavier lifts, like the Planning Commission or an equivalent TCLP board, that's pretty much their only role, because those between being a city commissioner and that, it's a heavy lift. I mean, Brian's he's lived the dream. He's done both at the same time as you two are now, and so you probably feel that your schedules get. And again, a lot of people also work full-time jobs and things like that. So just trying to be realistic with people's time, and how they can best serve. So I think that's
Why
you
we
see
get the
some of
big
that.
bucks, right?
Who, you guys?
Compared to the planning
We
commission.
get 0 bucks.
The planning commission does get cookies in December.
We get cookies, we do.
Cookies once a year.
Yeah.
Hey, I've done it more than once.
That's true.
I'd just like to say that as somebody who worked really hard to get to this position, I never had a good answer why there are 2 city commission representatives on this board. It was always kind of like, it's just how it's always been, I don't know, like nobody knew the answer to that. And I think opening that seat up, I mean, there were 6 people that applied for 2 seats total. I mean, that opens up 1 seat for those 6 people to apply for. So I think just as for someone who worked really hard to get here, I think it gives somebody like me an opportunity to be here.
If I could respond to that, I too am troubled by the lack of turnover on our commissions, and I think some of that may be driven by our policies on reappointments, which I think bears some scrutiny by the city commission.
I don't think,
Just to
I wasn't
review.
saying I'm troubled by the
Well,
turnover.
I'm saying I'm troubled.
Okay, just clarifying, I'm not troubled by it, so.
Well, I think that lack of turnover reduces the number of openings for fresh faces and new representation and new thoughts. And
So let's turn a seat over.
I think that the entire policy should be reviewed.
Are there limits, term limits?
No, they're not.
No, they're not. And honestly, for a lot of people, some of you are newer too. I mean, there's a learning curve. It's I will say as staff, we do like it because we have to invest a lot of time in training. We spend a lot of money sending planning commissioners to conferences to be, educated and informed. And a lot of times you're really not getting to that status until the end of your initial term, right? It takes time to learn the process. I mean, we throw around language out here that we use every day that, someone sitting on the planning commission as a first-time planning commissioner may be confused by that, and it takes time to learn some of that. So it's not uncommon to have people stay more than 1 term. They are volunteers. They're willing to maintain that commitment. So, I mean, I know from a staff perspective, we often find it more beneficial than not, just because, a lot of these things that we discuss sometimes extend over, a calendar year, and they're, having those conversations continue can be a benefit.
Did you have something to say?
Yeah, I'll touch on a number of things quickly. I've covered communities in my prior life career that have tried term limits, and they've all dropped it. It just didn't work out for a number of reasons. And I will tell you that previously, it's pretty much if you served on a board, and you wanted to serve again, you were in. There was no interview process or anything else. And the city commission adjusted that now everyone gets interviewed as long as there's openings or applications, and that you always requested to know what the attendance record was. And at least we started off with a letter, and then they just moved to a full, showing you want to be reappointed and why you want to be reappointed and addressing any issues you had with your attendance. And then it became a question of, and then they just said, we're going to interview everyone, But that was a change that started when I was on the city commission, and it took a while to get staff to remember that process. And I think your answer is, why are there 2 city commissioners? I don't know if it's in the charter or if
In
it's
an
just
ordinance.
because it's always been that way.
Yeah.
As far back as I can remember.
Yeah.
If you ask anybody, that's why.
Yeah.
I think the advantage of it is that you have 2 commissioners on it, and if they're voting together, they can advocate for both sides of an issue before the city commission. If they're voting opposite or if they're voting against it, you're pretty much dead in the water. And you know that here, if you get them split or they're together, then they generally advocate for it and has a better chance of passing. always depends on who their representative is and, you know, and what the level, it so improves the level of communication, I think was already said already. On the downside, I can see where, you know, is it necessary? I didn't think about it, you know, until Sean said it, is that most only have one city official, but I've seen some townships that have 2 or 3. I mean, literally, they have 3 commissioners and 4 members of the public, you know, or 3 trustees or whatever. And a lot of times, it's the supervisor. I've seen counties where it's the chairman of the board, it's also chairman of the planning commission. But bottom line, it's a city commission decision, whether they want to do it. If you want to ask them for that, you know, we have 3 ex officio positions here. We have the city manager's position. I've worked with 3 different appointees here now. They've all been excellent people, and they give you an interesting insight into some aspects of, you know, how the city government works. But, you know, again, that's a question for the city commission. But you're right, a lot of people want to be on this commission. So that's not an issue.
Let me ask you this. Is there enough interest to keep exploring this, to put it on the agenda for the study session? And if so, one of the things I would want to know is, what is the process for changing an ordinance? Because that's what we would be asking the city commission to do. So if we're going to continue this discussion, could we have that information at the time of the discussion?
Yeah, and I can add that the process of amending an ordinance, as I believe it, is the same as adopting a new ordinance. So since this one is existing, it would be an amendment. The charter calls for them to formally move to introduce any amendment or new ordinance. So that's an action of the city commission. And then you have to wait at least 14 days before they can act again, which it's 2 weeks between business meetings, so that's how it works. In a way, what that does is gives people time to be aware of the pending vote. So,
Okay.
Yep. And they can always choose not to introduce it, and then it dies at that point. Correct, Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got to introduce it. Somebody actually has to introduce it
'Cause-
or make a motion to do it. If there's no interest on them, it doesn't happen. And it won't, you know, you can ask them and it would show up as a request for an ordinance change.
Right.
So they're going to ask for an ordinance change. If they decide it's something they're interested in, then the city attorney would have to draft the ordinance. And so then it gets pushed into that, and maybe in 3 or 4 months, it might come up for a vote. And by then, most people have forgotten why they're looking at it anyways.
Yeah, and so like, for instance, the zoning amendments are the same thing, because they're an ordinance. And so, you know, I think Anna was around, Mitch was at least spectating at the time, and Brian was, but there was a proposed amendment for clipped corners on fences at alley intersections. And so, you know, even though there are 2 city commissioners on the planning commission, honestly, it's me that presents it all at the meetings, and they chose not to introduce it. It just died there. They were like, yeah, I think we got other priorities right now, and that's where it just kind of ended, and we didn't move it forward to the next meeting. So.
Yep.
And that's
remember it.
the way it works, you know. It's, you know, this group will put in a lot of time, and you'll send things to them, and they may have different priorities, and that's how the tree shakes sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you basically would be sending them a letter or official request, you know, that would be voted on. So I guess, you know, if you're going to do it, you got to come up with your reasons why. Why are we doing this? Why do we think it's important? You know, and how does that, and the planning commission may just, or the city commission might just say, yeah, let's get somebody off of that. Because you know what, it's just, and that throws that person back in to fill all the other slots. Because he's right, when you're on one of the big ones, which the big ones are the ones that have the highest workload and the most regular meetings, that's it. That's all you serve on for the most part, other than ad hocs. And so, well, no, not everyone. So Mr. Treble is the first person who's bucked that in a long, long time.
Okay,
That
let
tradition.
me ask, is there enough interest to put this on the study session this month? Show of hands, how many people would like it on the study session? And Yeah, what?
Yes, with an asterisk.
Okay, what's
is
the
my
asterisk?
opinion. It's just that if there is even the slightest amount of interest from the city commission, then definitely we should talk about it and try to think through every avenue. If there is zero interest at all, I'm not interested in us wasting time on that, personally. I think we have other things that we could work toward that we're gonna talk about in goals. But if we find out from the city commissioners present tonight or from any other city conduit that there might be some interest, sure.
Would it be possible to, I suppose this could get discussed, but would it be possible to have somebody, either the county planner that's not a planner, or say a representative, a staff representative from Networks Northwest, that attends planning commission meetings as a non-voting member, but would be able to provide input on what's happening?
So that's an interesting proposition, and I think, let me say that, because I'd want to go back and clarify that that would be possible only in that we've done that with the student. Remember,
Yes.
they were a non-voting member. They had the authority to participate in the discussions, serve on committees, but they couldn't vote, A, because they weren't 18, and B, since the school districts don't align with jurisdictional boundaries, we realize that they may not be a city resident, but, you know, they still may attend the school in the city, and so that's why they were set up that way. So I think it's possible. I will need to verify that, though.
Okay.
You have a thought on that?
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
It was a good idea.
And I do know that there are communities that have in their bylaws ex officio members, but I think they might align with some of these ones that are specifically called out as non-voting. They're
Yes.
just there for informational purposes, sharing information, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because like the city manager's non-voting on the
Light and Power Board. Yep, exactly.
What do you wish to do? Sounds like, from what Anna was saying, we want to do a little exploration to see if there's any interest at the city commission level first. If there is any interest, then I think the second thing is for us to submit reasons to put into, I don't know if it's a letter or whatever it is that we send up there, about why we would want to do this, and then make a formal request.
Yeah. Can I
may
make
I-
one suggestion on that? I like that. The next meeting is a study session, so even if it comes back, there will be no action. It'll just
That's
be the
right.
opportunity to talk. It may be worth putting the bylaws back on there since, you know, you're just now thinking about it, many of you, and you're probably going to spend the next 2 weeks thinking. What I would suggest is, Shay, you seem to have an interest in this topic. Brian made a good point. You're probably going to need some bullet points, some arguments as to why. Would you be willing to maybe craft some of those by next Thursday that we could put in the packet for your peers, and then that could help facilitate the discussion at the next meeting, and you guys can decide from there. It doesn't sound like anyone's ready to make like action collective, or the collective group is ready to make action one way or the other, but maybe additional conversation will be warranted in the future.
Becky?
May I suggest that the bullet points include both the positives and the negatives?
Yeah, and you know, what Shay is willing to produce is a starting point
Yeah,
for
then we'll
discussion,
add
and then I think this group can add to it. At least that was my
I'd
point.
be happy to
And-
contribute some for the packet.
Yeah, or
on
or we
the
can even do it
opposite
at the
side.
meeting too, you know, have a collective
Yeah.
conversation, because
Let's
ultimately,
include it in the packet, shall we?
ultimately, this group will need to decide on what letter with arguments they want to send to the city commission, if they decide they even want to. So, we'll go from there.
Question, if we're not making any changes to the bylaws, do we need to adopt them?
No,
No.
Okay.
no, they're adopted, but if anything's amended, it'd have to be readopted.
I had two other suggestions for bylaw
Yes,
adjustments,
go ahead.
if I could. One was just because there are a number of new faces who weren't here last January. I wanted to ask whether the 6 p.m. start time is still optimum from a commission, staff, and public perspective. Has that changed at all with our new cast?
Works great for me.
I love the 6 p.m. start
Yeah, I
time.
like it.
And my other suggestion for the bylaws had to do with a practice that I've gotten very fond of for the city commission, which is a rotating inclusion of one commissioner in the meeting agenda review process. It gives one of our body a chance to see what's coming, to ask pertinent questions, make suggestions, make requests before the final agenda is actually issued. And I think it's in my experience, has been a way to get each commissioner really engaged and participating in the process. You know, for city commissioners, it's you're tagged maybe a little less than twice a year. For us, it would be more like once a year to sit in on the agenda development process. And I wondered if there was any interest in picking up that practice and applying it to our bylaws. If so, I had some proposed language.
It's in the, well, I just want to say it's in the bylaws that any commissioner can, by a certain period of time,
With
propose
10
something
days
for the
prior.
agenda.
Right, right.
The city commission agenda is a little bit different.
Yeah.
So for one, everything that, anything that's submitted, when it's ready, it comes before us. There's no delay, there's no postponing anything. We don't have really a consent calendar where you can, a lot of the purpose of that agenda review is deciding if you want something pulled off it's really deciding what's on the consent calendar and what's not. That's not an issue for us.
Well,
So,
but that is in our bylaws.
yeah, but our consent calendar basically
We
consists of
operate
the
very
minutes.
differently.
It's very.
Yeah, we don't approve anything else. I mean, yeah, it's in there, but it gives us the option, but we don't have consent items. We're not that type of body. And we don't have the choice on the things that do get submitted to us to not have them on the agenda. You're violating someone's due process rights, because if they have an application, it can't get bumped. So I think that's why it doesn't happen.
Is there a downside to including one commissioner in
Yeah, I mean, the
agenda
chair and
development?
I set the agenda, before that it was David, and before that
Oh,
was
it doesn't include the chair as being mentioned in the current bylaws.
I mean, Debbie and I, we talked an
mean?
hour on Sunday. We talked
Yeah.
like 4 or 5 times a week, and it was like that with David too, when he was the chair, so,
Yeah, the chair's always had a role in,
yeah.
I thought the chair setting the agenda, it used to be in the bylaws.
Yeah, it says the
I don't
planning
have it in
director.
front of me
It says
now,
the
but
planning
It's been that way
director.
since before I
As
started.
the planning director and
And if
any
we're going to
member of the
include the
commission
Any
chair
member
to
may
be
place
accurate
items
with
on the
practice,
agenda.
should we go ahead and include one other commissioner?
Well, right now, you're not including one other commissioner, you'd be including, in the city commission, was 2 commissioners, right?
No, it's
Just one commissioner
Well,
and the mayor?
The mayor,
The mayor
the
pro
mayor
tem.
pro
And mayor pro
tem,
tem.
and
And a
another
rotating.
and a
commissioner.
commissioner.
Okay, so, yeah, I mean, so now who are you gonna include, and do they wanna take that on? Okay,
It would be a
personally, if I
once a
can opt
year.
out, I wanna opt out. But if you have language that's coming here, it should have been submitted before this meeting.
Yeah.
So you would need to submit it for our next regular meeting, or you can submit it for that. And but I don't have any interest in doing it. I get the agenda, I get it when I get it.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's an advantage if you have a heavy agenda, okay? And city commission agendas are always heavy. So by going to that meeting, you get a leg up a little bit, okay? To review things, you know it's coming, so you got it, but you don't get any of the items until they show up in front of you. And I just, I don't know, with our turnarounds here,
Yeah, it's one of those things where
the
it has
question is, is it
a,
extra work and does it serve much of a purpose?
yeah, I say it has a function and purpose at the city commission level for sure, based on the nature of that commission and the workload that they have and the fact that they meet every week. I mean, yeah, it could be done here, but it's a very different body and it's a different type of agenda, and so it feels a little like apples and oranges comparing the two, just to be frank. It's,
Commissioners?
because the other
Any
thing is, like, the
thoughts?
city commission is dealing with things that are submitted from 12 different departments for approval,
Yeah,
throughout,
it's
where
very
that's,
different.
this is one body dealing with largely one department, and, you know, we're not having to approve every purchase, every diesel allocation,
Yeah.
you know, things
And
like
agenda
that.
review can be a way to say, hey, I think we need to definitely include an extra memo from this department in explaining this.
Right.
Oftentimes, the conversations allow a preview of questions that are likely to come up in commission discussion, and a chance to sort of get ahead of those and proactively respond. It seems like a pretty small, 1 hour investment per year for the potential of some improved communication.
I would just add, and we'll do whatever you guys want. It may be a 1 hour investment for you, Jackie, but it's a 3 hour investment for staff every other week too. So just kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's
Because we would be there, right?
Yeah.
so
And
I
It's
mean,
just sitting in on the review that you would ordinarily be doing, I guess, with
I guess
Debbie,
she's
which I guess should be written into the bylaws, right?
Doesn't
Yeah,
have
we
to
do
be-
it more like through phone conversations
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
so
It's not a formal meeting on a certain date at a certain time. It's just before the next meeting.
yeah, and I mean, and usually it's during the day.
Yeah.
So, and honestly, for all of us, it's not easy to get away during the day to go to a meeting in the middle of the afternoon, or whenever it gets scheduled. The other thing, I look at it, I mean, you can bring up questions, but it's really only bringing up questions that one person may have. I do that when I review the agenda anyways. I review the agenda, and then when I email them as soon as I can. I review the agenda when it comes out. I get a notice. I look at just what's on the agenda. If there's something complicated, I'll skip around and look at those early and try to get them any questions or concerns or things I want to see before the meeting, and let them know what questions I'm going to be asking, so they're able to find answers.
We all should be doing that.
Yeah, and Brian and I have
I
a
was
very
wondering
good.
how many are following that best practice.
Brian's probably the best at it, and
Yes.
in all fairness, he was probably the best at it in his last term too. Like, he communicates well, but Brian and I have established understanding, like, if it's a specific question that he wants an answer to now, I answer it. Otherwise, he throws out questions that I provide answers to in my overview, and then if I don't adequately answer it, he knows to ask deeper and stuff, and it's been helping frame what I present, because, I'm like, oh, if that's what you want to know, then yeah, send it my way.
The impression I'm getting is that commissioner participation in preparing agendas is kind of spotty and kind of individualized, and this would be an opportunity for everybody to play and to have it be a more standardized process that everybody could count on.
I think that there have been a couple agendas this year that even I've been pulled into. So there are moments where vice chair gets pulled in to discuss the agenda, but I've mostly just deferred to chair because chair has volunteered for that commitment, and I, like Brian said, have a very hard time walking away during the day. And there are so many things that we have no say in getting on that agenda. Like, we have no control when somebody is going to put a PUD through or put a SLEP through. So, like, there are those kinds of things that I don't want to, I know and trust that staff know when the time is to put that on the agenda. I don't think it's for me to review when I know it has to get on the agenda because of a timeline of when they made the payment to get on the agenda. So, like, there are things that are more complicated and convoluted than, like, city commission. So that
What you're describing is very, very similar to what
Yeah.
happens in the city commission agenda review. You know, it's simply a chance to give a preview of potential. staff be more prepared for that meeting to perhaps make forward progress more efficiently. It's been, in my experience, really helpful, I think, to the overall workflow and to the individual commissioner who participates.
So let me ask this to keep the meeting moving along. For one thing, I want to say, we are a different animal very much in the city commission, some of which is what Anna just said. We have no control over things that come in and the legal timelines that follow them of when they come before us. Many times at the meeting, over my 3 years here, topics have come up where we have said, can we put this on the agenda? So we all heard that it's going to be put on the agenda. And I'm hoping to do follow-up, and Leslie and I have been talking about this recently, of following up on those things to make sure they get on. And the timing of when they get on depends on what else is coming before us. But if there is, amongst everyone, this desire to talk further at our next study session about having a more formalized agenda review where everybody takes a turn in coming, do you want that on the next agenda? Is there a desire for that? Brian, was it yes? Are you a yes? What do you
No,
think?
I'm just going to say that, I mean, yeah, at this point, if people want to think about it, I have no interest in it.
Same.
But if if you want to bring it forward, support has to have it put on a future agenda, whether it's a study session or a regular meeting, put your language out there and we would vote for it. But the only way I would vote in favor of it is if you include language that allows me to opt out from the obligation.
I can
Okay, so
guarantee
I'm just saying, I saw a no, a no, a no, a no, a no. So I don't hear a desire, I don't think we have a majority to put it on the agenda.
So
But
we-
y-
so
But
we
you have
wouldn't
the
even
right
put
But
it
per
you
the
on.
have
bylaw.
the right to bring it.
I would love to bring it back to a study session.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Okay, I just had, is that all you had, Jackie, for the?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Thank you.
This, I don't even know, I just read this in the act, and it wasn't in the bylaws, so I don't know if you need to add it, but under page 2 of 8, under 5, where it says, the first nominee who receives the majority of the votes is elected for that office, in the act it says, and they take office immediately. I don't know if that needs to be in the bylaws, but it's in the act.
Can I look?
Maybe I missed it?
This one. Oh, I
No,
see
it's
it on
here.
the page.
Here.
I
That's
just
the
want to
next
make sure
one.
it's not,
Yeah, I looked for it, maybe I didn't see it, but,
and you could be correct.
but I read it, kept reading, but I didn't see it, but it could be there.
If you want it really formal, you could do it the way the city commission does, which means that your term as chair expires at the end of the year until a new person is elected, in which case, in the city commission, the city clerk opens up the meeting. In this case, I guess it would be the city planner would open up the meeting and call for votes. But
God, I don't want
personally, I mean, if you're going to go, but
We just went through a process,
honestly, I
it
don't
worked.
think it's worth the paper to put it on. Unless staff thinks it's required, I just think we do it that way. It works. Why waste staff time and our time?
No, what I'm saying is,
So resubmit, I understand what you're
Yeah.
saying, is does it need to be on there? That's a question for staff. If staff
Yeah.
thinks it needs to be on there, they
it's
can
just
bring it
one
back.
sentence to
If
add.
they don't.
Yeah,
they-
I mean-
You have to, they gotta print it back out, put it out there, make the change to it. And what do we gain if it's not required?
I
So,
was just trying to follow the act with the accent.
but we do
but
it in
it's-
practice anyways, so. Once you're elected, you immediately take office.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
So-
just brought it up. It doesn't have to. I mean, one way or the other. I just saw it and was wondering.
That's a good point.
You can work on that and let us
Mhm. Yeah,
know.
I'll
I don't
look
think
through
we
it,
have to read through the whole thing now, but, okay, you're good with that? So does anybody else have anything else to say about these bylaws? And if not, we're going to move on to goals. Are we ready to move on to goals? Okay, Leslie, am I throwing that to you or to?
Sure.
You are,
Or
okay.
kind of tag team this?
Yep,
Okay, we
I'll
can
get it
tag it.
started and I'll let Sean jump in here.
Okay.
So I did put together some potential goals for you to consider for the upcoming year. And this was kind of easy because we just did this for the master plan. So this is pretty closely in line with that. And it's organized in broad umbrella groups of goals that are very similar to the goals that you adopted last year. So the first one, I did want to put it on your list, even though you've completed it, and that is adoption of your master plan. So that obviously wouldn't be a goal for this year. The second one would be more broad than it is listed in the master plan, is expand housing opportunities. So there's specific zoning changes that come along with that are spelled out in the master plan and part of the goals, the tasks that you have decided to prioritize for the master plan. But it's a little bit broader than that as well, and covers other things as they may come up during the year or that we may drill down on. And if you so choose, when we come back with this, potentially at your next meeting, with a little more flesh on it, spelled out a little bit more, if there are any other broad housing-related tasks that weren't called for in the master plan, that might be where those would belong. And then the next two are ones that are, again, part of your goals for the master plan and were goals last year. The riparian buffer ordinance, which, believe it or not, it is being worked on in the background. You should see it soon.
Mid-January?
Well, maybe not mid-January, but
That's
soon.
what it says.
And short-term rental ordinance, which, as you know, we've been working on. And then there were, so the list is getting long. There were some other targeted zoning amendments that were called for in the master plan. And those were things that were, kind of low-hanging fruit and things that are kind of more direct, things that could be done without other things having to happen first. And then lastly, this the heavy lift zoning amendments that we talked about that may require other plans, other activities to happen first, other decisions to be made. And given that the list is already kind of long for 2025, those might bleed into 2026. So this is just kind of a broad outline of potential goals, and we're just looking for a little feedback to see if we're on the right track and what kind of additional structure to this you might want to add for next time.
And I'll add some additional context and thoughts, specifically under the second bullet or the second item, where it talks about expand housing opportunities, and on the next page it talks about priority 4 in some of the items from the master plan. So if you are feeling like there's a lot to try to get in there in a year, the 14th Street Development District, you may have some time on that. I was in a meeting today. We just preliminarily got awarded some money from the MPO, but that wouldn't be until 2028 at the earliest that 14th Street would have any work done to it at this point. I do think it's important to maybe get the zoning in place before the street reconstruction, only because we learned from 8th Street that when the city makes an investment in itself, then the private investment follows. So you want to have the development guidelines that may fall, in place to support the development outcomes you want that may follow that 14th Street reconstruction. So that's that one. I am curious today on the Planning Commission's thoughts on the triplexes and quadplexes in R2. Because I had a gentleman come in yesterday who lives in Traverse Heights, and he owns 5 adjacent lots. Some are vacant, and he can have them split and I think maybe make a few more, but he wants to build housing in there. So with the new allowance, well, honestly, it's zoned R2, and they were always allowed duplexes, so he was going to build duplexes. But if he could build quadplexes, he'd build quadplexes. So he knew we were having this conversation tonight, so he was going to wait till after tonight's meeting to call back to the office to see if you guys provided any direction. So if you have any thoughts on that, I would be happy to hear it. I will say that was something that the Planning Commission recommended in '23 to the City Commission. The City Commission voted to introduce it, which is what we talked about earlier. They did that formal step along with a bunch of others. On the night that they did their votes in October, it was the last one, and it was such a long meeting. I don't know if they just never voted on it. Like it just kind of like fell solid there. So there wasn't a no vote or a yes vote. I think there was just a lot of discussion, and so it's kind of been this like dangling item out there that we get questions about sometimes from people and things like that. So
Yes, I've got a couple things, but first, just directly responding to what Director Winter said. I don't know if you have the answer, but I know that you can ask it of people that have the answer. One of the barriers I've heard from developers in not just our community, but throughout the country, is that an issue of building a quadplex is that when you're more than 3 units, it requires a fire suppression system. Would having a streamlined approval process, as we're discussing here, help the numbers then pencil out for a quadplex? Or do you think, whether this developer in Traverse Heights or elsewhere, that the numbers are just so desperate in need of housing for our market that that extra 20 grand is not a concern?
I can't answer that definitively. I think there's too many variables in play. You are correct that the code does require 3 or more units to be sprinkled. So we don't administer the fire code. There may, like in many cases, there can be workarounds depending on how it's developed. I don't know for certain on that. This particular person, I would not call a developer. He just happens to be a resident who owns some lots, and he knows we need housing. And
who recognizes the development opportunity.
Yes. And so he's exploring what he can do. It's what I would call your non-traditional developer. Someone who has an opportunity, but they're looking to meet the needs of the community. But that's not their job necessarily.
Okay. And my next point, under Goal 5, I guess how we're numbering them, Priority 3, there's 3 things that, although they handle different parts of town, seem to be a similar process. Item 3 of D zone along 14th Street is the same as number 3 under Goal 2. I see that as, I mean, we could handle all 3 zones at the same time, but it would, if we want to have more input from each, for lack of a better term, neighborhood about the flavor they want in that rezoning or reexamination of the zoning along the small structural corridor, that I would like us to be handling one at a time and then one after the other. So if you're saying 14th Street, there's money down the road, but it's a ways down the road, so that could be an opportunity for us to pick Union Street or West Front Street to go through the process first and then have a better sense of how it goes.
Yeah, I would agree. And, the scale of improvements that may occur on 14th Street are to be determined. The MPO was able to award the city approximately $1 million. It's estimated to cost, depending on utility work, $10 to $20 million.
Yep.
So if other monies can't be materialized, it may just be a mill and fill and the road character won't change. where they shave down the top of the asphalt and put a new coat on. So that's where, you know, the
Well,
city
even that would be
administration,
better
and
than
city
we got.
commission will need to work
Yeah.
on helping to identify their priorities that they see and what they're willing to fund, because there's a big gap right now for street reconstruction projects.
Jackie?
Yes. Can I ask about accountability for these goals? You know, do we hold our own feet to the fire to accomplish all of these within our calendar year that's beginning now? Or is it, we're gonna push in all of these directions and see how far we can get on all of them? Or what are you recommending? What are
Well, so
really
we
under
have
consideration?
evolved this process from when I first started, because the goals from the year before were overwhelming. I'll just say that. It was so lengthy that they barely put a dent in it. So the Planning Commission over the last 3 years has worked on trying to trim it down into what's reasonable that can be accomplished. As we have stated in the past, it's all subject to what, as a department, comes down to us that then dictates our time and then what we can do. Like, for instance, when this was published, it talked about Riparian possibly being done mid-January. Well, last night, the city commission now directed Leslie to go and follow up with all the CDBG recipients to see if they're going to now go electric. That's gonna take her time, that's gonna push these things off. So we can have the best intentions, but we have to respond to what our city manager via the city commission provides us with. So there's always that caveat that, you know, we set a goal, it's aspirational, it's our guiding star, but we can't predict what's gonna come down the pipe that we have to deal with. Like, to Anna's point, we could have a huge PUD application dropped on us next week, and the planning commission and staff spends 3 months on it. Well, that's gonna obviously have an impact on what goals can get accomplished in the rest of the calendar year. So more often than not, we do see things like you're seeing here today, things that aren't yet finished that get carried over. So like last year's was finish the master plan, right? The previous year was to do the master plan. So it's, some of these things are
Riparian
more than 1
buffers.
year long.
Riparian
And
buffers have been a
so
long time.
we do the best we can, I guess, is what we
And
say.
yeah, even as a specific thing for, yes, expand housing opportunities has been on here
For
for
years.
literally the 6 years that I've been following. Each year it's been there.
Yeah.
But for at least 5 of those years, something about expanding the allowability of triplexes has been part of that package, and it's been reshaped a couple times, but
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, like,
Yeah.
because there was a lot of criticism of the members of the planning commission for pushing through the housing stuff that, I mean, I literally still have the letter that my predecessor left me on my first day saying, this is all the housing stuff we've been working on for the last few years that needs to continue. So it's been a
A
5-6 year
long time.
process.
Anna?
I think a lot of the things that we are talking about from 5 and 6 have a housing impact.
Yeah.
So I think you can kind of group those up there as well, although I would hesitate because I like the way they're grouped right now. But like you could, if we cross some of those off, we could think about them as progress toward the housing goal. One idea that I had was maybe quarterly at a study session, we review these, because I think right now it's maybe happening once a year or maybe twice a year. And so I'm a visual person, so if I can see this and literally like with the numbers we have gotten through struck out in the text, whatever final version of this, that would be really helpful for me to see. I know it is a little bit of a lift, and I think it would be beneficial for us to celebrate those little one-off amendments that we had made as a goal that we got done because we could squeeze it into a meeting, but we're not actively remembering that we got it done, so we progress toward that goal. So that's just an idea that could help us visualize as we're progressing through. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, and it's actually nice that you mentioned that, because just this evening, Katie purchased our department's membership for this program called Asana, which I used at a last place, which allows for project
Project management.
Yeah, and
Yay,
so, and the
good.
nice thing is,
It's
I
what I
didn't-
do all day, every day.
With Asana.
No,
With
I
something
didn't
similar.
like Asana, so I moved to a different one.
But Laura tells me it's the best project management tool.
And
It's
so the
pretty
nice
good,
thing about
but-
that is like, I think, and again, we just got it today and it's been 3.5 years since I've used it, but I think we can take like, create a project for planning commission goals and have them, and then the subtasks and due
Yeah.
dates and stuff, and it'll produce a Gantt chart like we did last year to kind of like timeline things. So we'll play around with that once we kind of get this more memorialized from the planning commission of what they want to see. And I wrote down here, happy to provide like status updates quarterly or something of where we are. And by tracking this through Asana, it'd be really easy to produce that.
And
know,
you
we
could-
just, because you mark things as complete as you go
Yeah.
through the list, and then it tracks all that.
It could simply be an email to me. Like, it also doesn't have to be an agenda item. I think just seeing it in an email with some sort of visual that you're talking about would be fantastic. 'Cause
Well, and I'm happy, I think I appreciate your flexibility in there, but I think there's a benefit to the public too,
I
of
agree.
having it at a meeting of saying, this is where we are collectively.
Yeah.
But a nice thing also to do is on the agenda where we are voting on something, just in parentheses, tie it. This is tied to goal 5. This is tied to goal whatever. So we know that we are voting on things for that particular goal and we're moving ahead on it. So one question I have for you all now is, do you feel these are properly prioritized, or are you looking for us to prioritize and say, we want you to do this first? We want you, I mean, the ones, forget the ones that are in process, because we know they're in process. But what do you want from us?
We don't, it's a good question. Not trying to dictate, we're trying to just gather direction from you all,
Okay.
essentially, to know where we can allocate our time and resources. Because, as I mentioned, things come up constantly in
Right.
our line of work. So
Right.
as we make judgment calls of what to do next, this direction would help guide us into where we
Okay,
can prioritize.
so I am reflecting back on a recent meeting where I saw all heads nodding yes about housing. Is that still the case? Yes.
If I could add on to that, I think we were referencing housing policy,
Yeah.
actually, as a topic. And while these are some very specific zoning ordinance-related action items, I thought that some of that conversation was about more of an umbrella look at the city having or developing a housing policy, and this group being the point group to drive that.
So one thing we talked about in the past is there are some new tools. There are financial incentive tools designed to address the affordability component of housing. There is a role for the Planning Commission to play in that, but not until the City Commission takes some sort of, or provides some sort of direction that they want to move forward with implementing some of those financial incentives. And the city attorney has a lot of that teed up, but again, it's a matter of when can it get on an agenda, That's where we are in that. So
Does it require a formal vote, or would a study session, head nodding be
well, at some point,
sufficient?
it would include a formal vote, because it'd be like the pilot ordinance, where you have to adopt an ordinance and a policy for how that is going to be put into place. But those new incentive tools require establishing districts where they can be used. And that's the land use component where the Planning Commission plays a role. But there isn't a lot of sense in the Planning Commission spending their time on that if the City Commission hasn't indicated at all that they're willing to adopt those new programs. So if they indicate that they are, then that's something that we would program on the agenda to start having a discussion of, okay, if they want to provide the affordability, you guys focus on the land use, you guys make the recommendations of where the housing should go, and then that tie bars to the ordinance.
This might be an appropriate time for me to mention. I was going to do it in announcements from the city commission updates, but I did make a request to get on a study session to discuss whether there were police power ordinance concepts that we could pursue relative to short-term rentals in the city. And so That's tentatively coming up at the end of April. And maybe I can reframe that to, look at also the affordable housing piece of that and tie those two together. So,
Yeah.
I'm also wondering, we all know housing is an issue. I mean, all the commissions know housing is an issue. Would it behoove us to have a joint meeting between the city commission and the planning commission
that's what I
about
requested.
housing?
Yes, and so the city manager contacted me after she received your email yesterday, and we talked about that.
Okay.
The police power ordinances as they relate to short-term rentals and stuff, I think that's getting pushed out to April
April 28th, I think.
for now because it's premature to have it because the planning commission hasn't put forward any land use considerations that may require a tie-barred police power amendment. So that's why it's kind of waiting. Honestly, it would be nice if the topic of these housing incentives before the end of April could get to the city commission. I mean, these things take months, and we're dealing with a pretty solid housing problem. So, it would be nice to not wait 4 months to even begin those conversations. So that may be something as city commissioners you could, city commissioners too can add anything to an agenda. So you could add just a discussion item of, hey, we have the Affordable Housing Facilities Act, the Residential Facilities Act, and the enterprise zone information,
If you could provide me with the details on that, I would be delighted to carry it forward for us.
Well, so what I would recommend, Jackie, is shoot Lauren an email, because she has been working with one of her cohorts who already went through this process in Frankfurt, and he sent her draft ordinances and everything already. She has it teed up and ready to go. So I think a nudge from the commission may help. She's just taking the lead from what the commission wants, and a lot of priorities have come up lately.
But on top of that, as Planning Director Winter had said, these things like triplexes, quadplexes, ADUs, never got a solid answer on them. So we need to have a discussion. This is just how I feel. We need to have a discussion together, yes.
I was going to ask, what if the city commission, it's just floating out there, right? The city commission, what role do we play in bringing that back to them? Because technically, can't the city commission bring it back? I don't know. This might be a question for Brian.
If they didn't take a vote, it just dies.
Right.
So
It's
it
never
is on
been
us
put-
to.
They didn't table it, they didn't do anything with it.
Gotcha.
It's
Okay.
just gone.
Yeah, there's never a motion or anything.
Okay.
There was
So it's
just-
on us to bring it back to them, basically.
Yeah, I mean, and that was your question that we haven't really addressed, so.
Yeah.
Do we want to move that up on the priority scale because you have someone who wants to use it and may want to expand? Now, understand this, is that the person may be in that position saying now, yeah, I'd much rather build triplexes than duplexes, but then when he actually gets to it and starts pricing out the differences and the changes, doesn't happen. So that's always a consideration. I mean, someone wants to know what their options are. But, if you want to take it on, is that a priority, and do you push something else back? And that's the real question. Do we want to say, let's start talking about this next week in the study sessions? What were we going to talk about next week? Or in 2 weeks?
2 weeks, we have a discussion on the short-term rental regulations. We have the annual report. We're going to bring the bylaw discussion back. There were some notes on that, so.
So which is more important, and do you have time to throw that in there too? That's the question for us.
I think if we did a lot of legwork the first time, and there's not very much to change to it, I think we take that one soon.
We
This-
need direction on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this also, I also really, really, really want riparian buffer. Like, this is.
But you're getting it. I
the-
mean,
I know,
that's where-
but
yeah.
like, but does that mean it has to go up above housing? I don't know. Because I don't.
progress.
It's a
Well,
constant
I think
process.
It is,
your-
but like Leslie just said, she gets a directive from the city for CDBG, and I just want to make sure that riparian buffer, because it has been years in the works, doesn't get set aside. And if we're also prioritizing housing above that, does that mean that that gets set aside in Leslie's list of priorities? And in advance of the spring and the summer, it just feels like the momentum, because I've now sat through multiple years of doing that. Like, this goes back to Russ.
Yeah.
Of like trying to target the right season to bring this up with the public, and it just feels like a missed opportunity if we don't prioritize that to get it out the door.
Yeah, and I think you are very correct in that. One thing I would add, which is different now than in previous years, is that we have a Leslie. So we
Yeah,
have
that's
another
true.
planner on staff, so we can do more on parallel tracks than we could do before. So I don't see anything necessarily diverting the momentum of the riparian buffer at this point, just because it's gotten so far along. And frankly, I think we'd like to get it off our plates too, just so we can focus on other
Yes.
things. It's not that it's like some huge burden or something, but we don't like having all these dangling outliers either. And in terms of the triplex, quadplexes, the duplex with ADU that you mentioned, that is all queued up, because it just kind of froze where it was left. So it wouldn't. Point I'm making is it wouldn't take much work just to throw that into a memo to bring back for a discussion, and action, no action, that's up to the commission.
And we can talk about this in the next meeting, but what I'm interested in is either a joint meeting between the two bodies to specifically talk about that, or if there is such an animal, a joint ad hoc, where there's members of the city commission and members of the planning commission who are going to attack this housing issue and really be honest with what will we stomach, what won't we stomach, so we know how to move forward. We all know we have a problem. We have to do something. And I just want to talk about it, together and work on it together if we can.
I wanted to just ask a question about Sean's comment about the triplex, quadplex being all queued up. In my mind, the thing that has changed versus what was addressed 2 years ago and what is now is that this is written as though those need to follow pattern book designs. And I don't recall that as being a part of the proposal from 2 years ago.
No, and it wouldn't have to be part of a pattern book. There wouldn't have to be pattern book designs to move it forward. It could be something that could supplement it. It could supplement it in the future if they decide to move it forward now. They could, follow up with that, or it could be held off into the future. It's up to you guys. But it's not mandated that it has to be tied to.
Question, how close are we on, we have a study, we're going to talk about STRs. Are we ready to actually see something, an ordinance drafted after this next meeting?
After the next study
Study
session?
session, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what we're kind of waiting for
Us.
is direction from the planning commission of what you want us to codify. And we have received feedback from at least one planning commissioner that's like, put forward your ideas, we'll evaluate them, you guys are the experts. And so we're willing to do that, but we don't want to usurp your input. So yeah, just next meeting, we'll have that discussion, and then at the beginning of February, we'll plan to bring some sort of draft back.
Good, so we're knocking that down. I guess the question comes back to, the duplexes, triplexes thing. Do you think we can throw that on the study session, even just to see the original ordinance, just to look at what was originally proposed?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I'll just add too, to that point, the goals don't have to be all hammered out today. We took a couple meetings last year to kind of work through some of these, so just know that, you're not in a position where you have to decide anything tonight,
So we just went through this discussion where we spent a couple meetings talking about it after the master plan.
Yes.
So I looked at them and do I agree with the goals? All of them? No. But they're important to some people, so I'm okay with it. And there's some of those goals that are important to me, but are they all important to me in that order? No. So, so I don't, looking at spending a lot of time on, really hammering them out, because we already did that as far as I'm concerned, and it kind of carries over. And I just tell you from, Anna, you've got to realize this too, is that we don't control our agenda. We don't. And we don't. So the planning staff, you guys can only do what you can do. And we don't control all your time. We don't control any of it. you do what you're instructed to do by the city manager, which does not always, which involves, I've learned over the years, there's a ton of stuff that we'll never see. It never comes before us, you know, and so there's that, and then people who want change or zoning changes or projects, site plan reviews, that eats up a lot of time, and we have no control over that. So we're accountable to addressing what's in front of us, you know, and the planning staff doesn't, we can't tell them, forget what the city manager said, we want you to focus on this,
But
because
they,
then we'd be talking to a different planning staff.
but they are looking for direction. So this is what I think I'm hearing in all of this, and correct me if I'm wrong. Housing opportunities is something we want to bring up in 2 weeks. Riparian buffer, we're very interested in that. It's in process. Short-term rental, also very interested in that. That's in process, and we could get an ordinance in a couple of months to look at. To me, that's a lot to start with. And I'm not sure that we should even add anything, but one thing that I do want to bring up that's not on here. I believe we, as a commission, need a communications goal. And I'm willing to do a lot of the heavy lifting on this. And the point of that communications goal is to give the public a way to communicate with us and for us to communicate back to them. And that can take a variety of forms. So you know from Ben's training that when somebody comes up at public comment, we are trained not to respond. Members of the public see that as we're ignoring them, we're not listening to them, but what we are finding out is successful is when we have small group discussions with people where they can ask us questions and we can answer, we can show them things, we can take in what they're saying. There's not a lot of anger and frustration, we're just sitting and talking. Trying to come up with ways to do that through a communication goal. It might be office hours. I just found out and didn't even know, there is a way for people to write in or video in, and it just means every couple of weeks, going there, looking at it, seeing what they're saying, and maybe taking 5 or 10 minutes at a meeting to say, in the last couple of weeks, this is what people brought up. If there's questions, we answer them if we can. If there are things they brought up that, let's say, the law prevents, we say, you know, great thing that you brought up, but the law says we can't do this, so at least they are informed, they know about that. So I am suggesting communications goal, and I'm happy to do the big work on it, and then bring back to you, I mean, Leslie and I have talked a little bit, Sean and I have talked a little bit, they already have ideas of things we can do, and we would take ideas from you and then just put them into play, however that is. Yes.
I think this is a good idea. I love that you are willing to take that on. That's my favorite part. It does feel like a good time to have that because this is going to be the first year post master plan where there is not a concentrated effort in public engagement by our board in the last 3 years. The last 2 years have been like lots and lots of engagement. So I think it would help make that feel less daunting, the stark contrast between we were having public meetings every week, one a week somewhere, or like neighborhood meetings or whatever, into this new place where we don't have to go through that again because we're not in master plan or mobility plan processes. I like it. I don't really know what it looks like, so I'm excited to see what you're gonna bring forward.
Please
So-
send in suggestions.
Yeah, and I'll kind of add, because like Debbie mentioned, we talked quite a bit on this, and I was having some similar thoughts. I contacted, the city does have a communications manager, Colleen, and I called her this morning to let her know that we'd be having this conversation, and if there was interest, we'd probably loop her in since she's a professional in that space. To what Debbie alluded to, Ask the City is the new program that we have. I don't know if it's widely known to the public yet, but it's on our website, and you can submit a question. It goes to Colleen, and then she reaches out to staff to provide an answer. If it's a more complicated one, what staff does is they just videotape and they speak to it, and then all those answers and videos get published on the website. So not just the asker of the question, but anyone can go and see those. So that is a resource out there that is new and, you know, hopefully has some opportunity to it. Debbie mentioned the office hours. I don't know if that's the right name for it, but, you know, the interim city manager had 4 of those when he was here. No agenda, just this is where I'll be for 2 hours. Anyone can come, any questions you had. And he talked to 100 different people in those 4 meetings, which is, you know, we have 4 of these meetings, we'll be lucky to see 20 people, you know, combined. So it seemed to be impactful. We learned from our last meeting, there was a number of, or 2 meetings ago, a number of people here, and we stayed and talked with them. And it was very beneficial because dialogue could take place. You know, what they were worked up about when we were able to show things in the plan, they admitted that they never even looked at the plan. It's just what they'd been told, and they're like, oh, it says that in there? You know, so like having those type of opportunities to connect with people are just invaluable. But this is not a conducive environment for that. So it may be a possibility where we do pick one day a week from 4 to 6. There will be, you know, 2 planning commissioners, kind of like how we did the pop-ups for the master plan. Like, here's a Google Doc, just commit, sign up for the ones you want to do. Staff members would be there as well to kind of facilitate and help provide information. Just give people that chance. And maybe it's every other week, maybe, you know, however you guys want to do it. But again, I think people want to discuss things, and unfortunately, these aren't really this isn't the format for it.
So I'd like to suggest, I mean, I'm happy to take people's suggestions unless you think you have to take them and then give them to me.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so if you just want to send me to my city government email, any suggestions, whatever flies out of your head, please send to me, and I'll try to collate them all, see what's similar, what's not, and then we can bring it up at I don't know if it'll be next study session, maybe the one after, to discuss it. And then, you know, we have to be mindful of everybody's time, too, that we're not going to take 30 hours a week talking, but as much as we can, I would like to do that. So please send everything to me. So where are we now in all of this? We're adding that. We have the housing. We have repairing buffers and STRs, and do we agree that that's enough for now? Do you guys agree that's enough for now?
Yeah, so we have the STR and the riparian, we have the housing. Brian had mentioned bringing that draft language, it's already queued up at the next meeting, so we can do that.
Which is housing.
Which is under the topic of housing.
Yep.
One thing, you know, the commission hasn't done this since I've been here, but I've seen it before. The commission could write a letter to the city commission being like, hey, you know, we are interested in exploring these new, I could ghostwrite it on behalf and have you guys look at it, but if it expresses your thoughts and, you know, it's a way to communicate to them your desire to engage in that conversation on those new incentive programs that are available. Then we have the communications thing that we'll be working on with Colleen. What am I missing? So there are some things that are listed on here that would be small tweaks, low-hanging fruit, like so under priority 2, goal 5, where it talks about, you know, some language to make parking lots at least EV ready, which essentially means you run some conduit when you install it. So therefore, when the market need is there, you can easily run the cable and have the EV chargers. Like, those are really easy tweaks. Yeah. Does the commission have interest in trying to knock off some of that low-hanging fruit?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna add,
It's like, no.
No.
Well,
Not
they got
important
to
to me.
get done, so.
People will do it because they need it or they don't. You know, if you're talking, every time you talk about, you know, if the market needs, if the need is there, they'll do it. It's just kind of, you know, it's just the way people add things in. It's a perk. Some people will do it, some people won't. You're right. But I just think it's, you know, running conduit, it's not expensive, you know, so that's reasonable. But I just don't see it having a big impact right away. But I doubt I'm sure the vast majority of you think differently. So I'm just saying, that's one of those things that wasn't important to me right now.
My
It's just more
tiny,
time.
tiny
but-
argument, tiny, is that I am an EV owner, and this summer, every single charging point in the parking structure was taken, like constantly. And that's my only charging point because I live in a building where I don't have my own carport or I don't have a plug that I can plug into. So my only access point was the parking structure, and they were constantly taken. Even now, there is, on the average, there's like 1 or 2 open. And they, to be fair, only have 8. They have 8 charging points in the whole structure. The other structure doesn't have them. And then if you go down to the ones on the bay, there's like 3 or 4 over there, and then there's like 1 or 2 over by the chamber. So, and if this is, I pay to park in the parking structure, so I like really want to be able to charge there. And if it means that we could have quicker access to more in the future, I'm interested in it. I don't think it would be a heavy lift. It doesn't seem like it would be. You would just allow for, I think, that as a use in somewhere in the ordinance. I think that's my interpretation of it. But somebody's experience is like they are happening. They are here. I can barely like plug in every night when I need to.
What they're asking is to require the
Oh, a requirement.
yes,
Oh.
to require the
So this would be
infrastructure.
almost like a dimensional a standard
Requirement
of when
with,
you,
for new builds.
yeah,
new
for new
builds.
builds. Yeah, so it's like, if I'm gonna build a
It's not gonna
multifamily,
help you in any of those other.
yeah,
No,
you're still
only-
gonna be looking for charging stations.
Only for large residential.
Yeah,
I could
or
see it,
commercial.
like,
Only
or
if Peninsula Place goes in, down,
Tell me
and
about
then
it, man.
they put in chargers, and they let you use their chargers. That's basically the only way it could happen.
Not likely.
You know,
So we're hearing a mixed bag on that.
Yeah.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
So after I've been listening to everyone, so I kind of feel like, all right, so we have housing, which is this very complex thing that involves city commission. There's legislation, and that's obviously a high priority. So I think that's definitely up there, and we need to work with the commission on developing what that looks like for, like, what's our role. So that's kind of, to me, the big overarching goal. The duplex, triplex, quadplex, I think that's a no-brainer to bring in because it was there. There was a lot, it's almost like the dust has settled, let's bring it back up. We already have a lot of the material, let's see what the appetite is. Or I think just even for me to see a presentation of what that, what was presented 2 years ago. Maybe there's some tweaks we have, and then obviously that would go back to the commission, and maybe at that point they'd vote on it because they're not, there was a lot during that change there. And then not necessarily the electric vehicle, I mean, that did pique my interest in the fact that, like, I think we still have a role, like, we don't want to lose track of low-hanging fruit that we can at the end of the year. Like, hey, we accomplished something small that we can say we did versus getting caught up in these complex problems. And then we're like, wow, we didn't even get anything done this year because it was so complex. Whereas we could say, hey, you know what, we did do something progressive, like consider electric vehicle infrastructure for new development, and that's something that's not going to go away. I think we can all admit.
It's not going
It's so that's us taking a little bit of the planning view of like, hey, we shouldn't let that fall off because it's not as important, but it's like if it's something that we can get done, it might in like 5 years be like, wow, I'm glad we did that because we're seeing, more electric vehicles. So I just think there's some tiers there of like any of these littler ones, and granted, maybe we go through that and we realize it's not something we want to do, but I think it might be at least worth one meeting talking about one of these lower ones.
Haven't really gone at one of the most traditional ways of prioritizing, which is a really simple A, B, and C, and say we're going to take 2 big A's and we're going to aim for 3 B's and 2 C's, or that we make progress at all tiers, but that we at least sort out and label 3 goals and which ones are saying low-hanging fruit, but if we could approach prioritization and even in a way that's that simple, it might help.
You know, given what you just said, I'm, I'll take back my earlier comment about is it important to me? No, it's not, but we have meetings where we cancel because we don't have much on our agenda or some of these big items, you're just not ready to present anything new to us, because of other time constraints. So, if those are plug and play, plug them in, let's play, let's have a meeting and deal with them,
Okay.
And because then something comes up and then we have to deal with it and, suddenly we've got these things that are stacked up on a big, long agenda and we haven't met for a month. So, yeah, let's plug them in and play them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one thing I'd like to add, if there is time after all of these things we've mentioned tonight, and maybe it's at the end of this year, who knows when it'll be, but this exploring building design standards is something that we're hearing a lot from people out in the community. And so I don't think that's as important as housing, riparian buffers, or what's the third thing? Short-term rentals. But if there is time to start addressing that, even if it's putting a subcommittee together or something, because it's being talked about a lot out there, I'd like to see that happen if there's time. I don't know how the rest of you feel about it, but,
I agree.
okay.
For commercial or residential? Because on here,
It says commercial, nothing to say that it wouldn't be for both. I mean, it's just, I think that's part of what a committee would talk about, right?
We
Yeah, I
already
mean-
have some design standards.
Well, yeah,
for
and that's the
commercial.
thing. So like when I started 3 years ago, there was an effort with a number of architects, facilitated by some of the DDA had hired, and they put together a list of recommendations, probably 80 or 90% of which is already required in our zoning ordinance. So, and the point I make is like, when you require it, there's still flexibility in what the outcome might look like. It met the standards, but someone's like, well, I want it to look different. Well, that's, they can still work within those standards. So, yeah, we can begin looking into that.
Just one thought, remember, standards can increase costs.
Oh,
The
absolutely.
more stuff you require,
You know that.
it
Yeah.
increase costs. Housing's an issue, housing's expensive.
Now this,
in
and
this city.
none of this would apply to 1 and 2 family because of the charter provision. So it would be really commercial and, yes, multifamily is residential, but by building code, that's kind of considered still a commercial because most time it's rented for commercial purposes by its owner.
But we can't have design standards on,
1 and 2.
because that's part of like the maintenance charter agreement.
Exactly, yep. So back in the 80s, so we can't,
So we can't tell you how to build it, and we can't tell you to
What it looks
maintain
like.
it either.
no, we can't. So like I remember there was a house on 14th Street with a bunch of broken windows, but it's a single family home, so we can't do much about it. So it sits there.
Charters can be changed.
Unless it's a drug house. If it's designated a drug house, then state law.
Yeah.
So do you guys feel like you have direction?
I think we have some direction to bring something back at the next meeting. Like I said, this is usually kind of an iterative process, so we would like to take what we've heard, put it together, bring it back, get your feedback, and kind of go from there.
Okay, so our marching orders are, 1, send anything in, was it by Thursday, about short-term rentals that you want to see? When was it?
I mean, if you can get it by the end of this week, we have to publish the agenda by Thursday next week. So that means we have to have time to get the memos, create everything. So that if you can get it to us by the end of next week, that gives us time at the beginning of, or end of this week, beginning of next week, we can start working on it.
Okay, then you're going to send me anything, any ideas you have about communications? For now. Bring the housing back up, and we might talk about it, a joint ad hoc committee or joint meeting with the city commission, or a letter to the city commission, something about the housing. Okay, any other statements, questions about these goals? Okay. Then we go to reports. Is there a verbal city commission update?
We had a meeting yesterday. It was a lot shorter than the meeting that we had before break.
It was. There were a number of items that were tabled. For instance, as Leslie knows, we weren't able to come to a vote on the community development block grants.
We
but
were
we're
missing two
close.
people.
We are close. In terms of the signage, the Pure Michigan branding on Tart Trail signage through the city, that was also going to be brought back in 2 weeks with some more information. MDOT gave an update on their progress for Parkway 2.0.
And DTE gave an update on their progress
on their
as part of
progress for
Parkway 2.0.
Utility preparation for that project. And those really were the highlights. There was not a lot actionable and quite a bit that is coming back around in 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you. A planning department update?
Yeah, we don't really have much. I mean, we're just kind of getting back after the holidays and getting the whole team back together.
I just want to add, as I always do, in regards to the communication discussion, that our door is always open. We don't need to have, I mean, I think what Debbie is suggesting sounds great, and that's wonderful, but, you know, until then, our door is always open as always. Emails from you guys can come in, the public can come in, the public can email, the public can call. We have more stories than we could account of how actually taking a few minutes to have a real conversation usually dispels wild information that people hear over their neighborhood fence or, you know, from someone down the street or something. So, yes,
We appreciate that.
please always come in. Yep.
Nothing else? Then I'm going to open this up for public comment. Does anybody have a public comment to make? Seeing none, then I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thanks, everybody. Very productive conversations. Yay. Parkway to I feel like I should know about this.
It's just
M22.
Oh, okay.
and including the roundabout at Tom's West
Through the
Bay,
72